another night, I guess. Day, night. It's really all the same right now, isn't it? Anyway, so I'm back with another chapter. This time it's chapter 11 of Talisman of the Winds, as per the title. So without further ado, I'm just going to launch right in, and I'll answer questions at the end. So you can feel free to pop them in the chat, and then I will answer them as I go. Alrighty, so chapter 11, Retrieval. Lucy was becoming a little annoyed at Thakkel. He seemed to have disappeared, and no one had seen him recently. Surely he hadn't gotten to some game that lasted this long. He'd missed 3 meetings, none of which were important, but missing them hinted at discourtesy to those who had attended. She wondered idly if her annoyance with Thakkel had anything to do with how careful she had been about chiding Dalthorio, who had missed the last 2 meetings. She could scold Thakkel, who would grin at her and ask if she was done now because he was missing a great game. He'd doubtless try to be at all the meetings after, though. Dalthorio, on the other hand, would take umbrage at the least hint that he really ought to attend meetings. He would go and sulk in his tent, and he likely even dream up some scheme of petty revenge. A servant came in, keeping the straight face servants kept when delivering bad news to their masters or mistresses. Well, it came out more brusque than she intended. Then I should probably be, well, lady, he hasn't been seen for 5 days. None of the gamblers can recall seeing him more recently than that. He may have deserted us. What? She sat up straighter. You recall, lady, that he was greatly disturbed at the result of using the talisman. Perhaps he felt he could not do so again. And he left without a word? Without even leaving a message to be given after he'd been gone? That seems unlike him. All I know, lady, is that he has not been seen anywhere in the army for 5 days. I see. Well, continue your inquiries. See if anyone has noticed him leaving. Yes, lady. The next shock came a few hours later. A servant entered and said, Lady? Yes? The messenger who was sent to Lord Dalthorio is back, and he says he has important news. Send him in. The man had been sent with an ordinary message, asking Dalthorio's attendance at the meeting. The same message had been sent to all the other leaders. What response could be so important? The messenger followed the servant in. He was dusty and sweaty and stiff from a long ride, but he bowed. Lady, Lord Dalthorio's forces are gone. Gone? Where? Gone home? And why didn't he inform me, or at least El Coriat? Lady, Lady, I don't know. I asked at the local village, and they told me that 3 days before, Dalthorio and then a lot of them had marched to Chaos away to the northeast. Rather than follow a 3-day-old trail, I thought it best to come back and inform you. Well done. Go wash and rest, but hold yourself ready to repeat this to Lord El Coriat if need be. When he and the servant had gone, she sat staring at the tent flap and thinking, why northeast? If he had left for better foraging, that was not the direction to go. Between her army and Bloody Narnish's, the territory had been picked clean. Was he going out to do battle against some part of Narnish's army? She shook her head. If he knew for certain that in a place nearby he could find a force he outnumbered badly enough, just perhaps. Her own scouts would have been bringing back the same news Dalthorio would be getting, though, and there had been no reports of such exposed forces. Was he deserting to Narnish? Unlikely. He was a major figure in Ascos' alliance, and Narnish would not forget that. Nor had he any important strategic information to offer. The meetings so far had no result beyond the repetition of the fact that the army of Ascos were still recovering from battle, and that there were altogether too many strategic possibilities, for most of them depended upon Narnish's first move. Pretty much all of those possibilities would have already occurred to Narnish. She shook her head. Ridiculous. Delthorio has so many things, but not a traitor. Thakkel looked up as the guards entered his cell. They came around twice a day with a bowl of soup. It was a bit better than what Delthorio's men had served, for it usually contained a withered vegetable or two, and twice a shred of mutton. They would unfasten his gag, hold up the bowl so he could drink out of it, and replace the gag, always prepared to prevent him from speaking. He wouldn't have thought it feasible, anyway, to call a wind in such an enclosed space where he would suffer this as bad as the guards. They took no chances, though. One time, after drinking the soup, he had a belch come up just as they put the gag in. Even as the first noise escaped his lips, one of the guards put a spear butt in his stomach. As he bent over, the other slapped a gag in his mouth and tied it in place. By main force, he kept the soup down, but it was a narrow thing. The one who had wielded the spear, shook his head. Shouldn't have tried it. Didn't think we'd still be watching, did you? They never, ever unfastened his hands, which were cuffed behind him. Today there were no mishaps, no difficulties, and they went out, leaving him to his daily chore, feeling around the walls. He was filthy and he stank, and his confidence was beginning to ebb, but he still searched. From as high as he could reach to as low as he could bend, looking for any slight roughness or peak that might allow him to abrade away the gag knotted at the back of his head. If he'd have managed it between feedings, because if they noticed, he'd have to manage it between feedings, because if they noticed the gag was worn away at all, they'd replace it, and possibly move him to another cell. Narnish took the message that had been tied to the bird's leg, then casually wrung the bird's neck. He'd had experiences with Dr. Gobnesh's trained birds, bringing messages to him. The things, if left alive, would dash themselves against walls, windows, cage bars, until they fell unconscious. If they recovered from that, then they would do so again and again until at last they did not recover. He was willing to use cruelty against any human being if it would suit his needs, but Narnish saw no reason to be needlessly cruel to animals. The message was brief. Light 2 fires, each 10 paces long, in a cross shape this evening at sunset, and I will come to you immediately. Well, the man had his ways and his means. He handed the message to a servant. See to this. At once, Highness. The king sat in silence for a time. He would dearly love to have someone stick a dagger into this Delthorio Hanavoto, but that was not a good idea. It would make anyone think a second time about joining him, if all the reward they could expect was the dagger in the ribs. He'd keep an eye on the man, though, and never allow him near a battlefield, nor anyone he might do serious damage if he had a change of heart. He must also, of course, make it known that the Ascos that Delthorio had joined him. Thakkel found a small, slightly jagged edge on one of the stones making up his cell. It was not too sharp and protruded just enough to be felt. From what he could feel of the stone's consistency, it would be a race as to which wore away first, the gag or the stone. Well, it was the best of a bad lot. Patiently, he began to rub the knot of the gag against the stone. He had to restrain himself from feeling for the stone from time to time to see if it was still sharp. In the course of his rubbing the knot, he also had to rub against the back of the wall. It was mostly smooth stone, but even so, it was not comfortable. In time, his back became so scraped and bruised it was a trial to force himself to continue dealing with the gag. Dr. Gobnesh's reputation kept him going. How long would it take for the magician to arrive? A message might go in one way, go one way in what, 4 days? And the magician would be a week or more returning. How long had he been prisoner here? With little light or sound from outside, it was difficult to tell. Had he spent 4 days feeling every inch of the wall, hands always chained behind him, or had it been 5? A thought occurred to him that Gobnash might have other, quicker means of traveling. Nope, don't think about that, just rub away. The fires were lit and burning according to Dr. Gobnash's requirements. Narnish tapped a forefinger against his thigh. He would not say out loud that he had hoped that this was not a lot of foolishness. It would be just like that little sand-colored horror to wait until Narnish had expressed his doubt anything was going to happen and then flash himself over. Narnish determined he would wait until the fire had burned to ash before he said anything at all. He continued to tap his forefinger on his thigh. Thakkel could feel the knot parting. It was a double knot, though, so he wasn't sure how much he had yet to go. Did the thing feel a bit looser? Should he convince himself not, so as to have a heartening surprise later? Or should he convince himself so, and the risk growing disencouragement? He pushed his tongue against the gag. He was certain it was a bit looser, but his tongue's pressure wasn't likely able to break the knot, not until he'd worn the leather to a shred. He continued to rub. Dr. Gobnash appeared suddenly near the fires, between the north pointing and west pointing arms of the cross. Most of the gathered crowd gasped. Narnish merely growled, "About time." He could see the doctor was a little unsteady on his feet at first, but seemed to recover as he stepped forward. "Good evening, Highness." "And a good evening to you. I'll have a servant show you your quarters." The magician was looking up and around, sniffing the air like a hound catching a scent. "No time. Send a message quickly to the jailers to open up the ox driver's cell and see to it that he is secure." Narnish didn't waste time asking foolish questions. How did Gobnash know? Well, the fellow was a magician. Even as these thoughts went through his mind, the king stabbed a finger at a servant. "You! Get up to the prisoner! Tell the jailers to check on the ox driver's security." It occurred to him that he pretty much repeated Gobnash's directions like an over-servant to an under-servant. He grimaced. "Run, Morker, eat you." The gag fell loose. Thakkel wet his dried lips and gasped. "Carda ejut? Lego lavagolnly." He heard noise and shouting outside, and the jailer, clearly a little panicked, clattering the key into the lock. "Fierce flying pig guts! How long will it take for Shipakalish to get here?" If they moved him to another cell, would the little man find him? The door swung open. Shipakalish appeared beside him, mule and all, as the guards rushed in, spears ready. The merchant grasped his arm and pulled. Thakkel flew from his feet at once. He, the mule, and the little merchant were standing on a volcano's rim, looking into the white-hot rock in the crater. "One more step, please." Thakkel might have tried to get up and take that step, but Shipakalish, still holding his arm, stepped forward. They were in a dark wood. What happened? He was safe in jail, gagged with his hands behind him. Dr. Gobnash peered around the cell in the flickering orange torchlight, then picked something up. "Here is the answer, Highness. He was gagged, but managed to rub away the gag. And then he called someone. If he has such friends, I may reassess my attitude towards this ox driver." "Such friends? What does this mean?" Dr. Gobnash turned his gaze on the king. "Highness, I would explain if it was worth the time. Suffice it to say that this is aimed at more flouting me than you. The forces against which I find myself fighting do not care much about you, one way or the other." Narnish took a deep breath. This was an insult. He didn't matter, did he? Gobnash spoke again. Highness, my apologies. This means of traveling is not merely wearying, but wearing. Please be assured I meant no insult. This is war of power, and though you direct my powers to some degree, it is at me that the attack is aimed. Nardash managed to control himself by taking up another subject. This method of travel, this brings you here instantaneously. I wish you had told me of it sooner. There are ways and times when I could have used it. I regret, Highness, that an ordinary man, after the trip I had made, would be unable to function for a day or more. Perhaps never. It is only because I have done years of specialized training, preparing body, mind, and spirit, that I am able to manage. And even so, I must have a long rest tonight. The king growled wordlessly. A hint, I suppose? Well, there seems to be nothing more to be done here. The archer had watched for 3 days, then chosen his target. The fellow was not the hamlet's headman, who would have too many armed followers around him, but rather a man of some respect among the ordinary people. Late at night, he slipped down into the town, managing to get all the way to the man's house without alerting any dogs. He was glad of that. He liked dogs, but he would kill one if he had to. Much better not to have to. All the windows were shuttered, of course, but he knew ways to deal with this. He was inside shortly, and soon after he touched the dagger's tip to the man's throat. Which woke him. Keep quiet. Don't want to kill you if I have to. Understand? Who is it? Who are you? It doesn't matter who I am. Keep quiet. Now see that? You've woken your wife. Keep her quiet, or I'll have to kill the both of you. There were a few minutes of whispered queries and responses between man and wife. Then the man said, What do you want? We've no gold here. Don't want your gold. Listen. I have a message here, written on a wood chip, that has to be sent to the Lady of Ascos. I can't go myself, so I need either you to go or have someone else sent. The message is important. I've been watching this town for a while, and none of you have seen me. I'll watch for a bit longer, and if anyone comes out hunting me, I'll come visiting again some night. Understand? Yes, I understand. The archer slipped back out. He hoped he wouldn't have to come back. He would carry out his threats if necessary. But he didn't like the trouble and bother. Shepakalish stepped behind Thoughtgoal and clicked something against his manacles, which fell away. Then he moved to face Thoughtgoal again and said, I myself am used to suffering any number of hardships and discomforts. My mule, on the other hand, is a creature of delicate constitution, and is easily upset by certain rank scents. The spring is next to us is warm water. To spare my mule's delicate feelings, would you mind going and washing? Unless you have some particular sentimental attachment to these garments, may I dispose of them? I have at least one outfit in my packs which would fit you. I will give it to you, and perhaps another day we can speak of payment. Thoughtgoal scraped and battered, found freedom and brought him from despair's depths to a lightness of mood he had never expected to feel again. It felt good to grin. You know, there are certain things a man can't do with his hands chained behind him. Come now, did I intimate the fault was yours? Though if you continue to delay, I shall begin to wonder. The water was warm, as Shepakalish had promised. Thoughtgoal left his garments on the pool's edge and sat soaking, savoring the water's comforting feel against his battered skin. Shepakalish fastidiously picked up the old garments and dropped them onto the fire he had built a little way away from the spring. I dislike to disturb a man in such comfort, he said when he returned, but I have a bit of food ready if you care to come and eat. It isn't soup, is it? No, not today. Only a bit of cured pork, warmed to sizzling, and some bread to go with it. You have a preference for soup? Watershed guide, no. I'm afraid my late experience has brought about in me a detestation of soup. Oh my goodness, that word. And now listen to me. I'm beginning to talk like you. The little man looked aggrieved. Is there something strange or improper about my manner of speech? Beware, gratuitous insults may cause the price of your new clothing to increase. Wardish love you. No, there's nothing wrong with your manner of speech. In fact, I am so happy to hear you that I am near to coming around to the fire to kiss you. Are you indeed? Thank you for the warning. I'll prepare my crossbow for the eventuality. No crossbow needed. I know when my fine personality and good looks have been rejected. But tell me, is not Narnish likely to feel rejected as well? And will he not take it less well than I? For instance, to the point of having his army out beating the bushes for miles around? The little man smiled. Well, he might wish to, but I fear that even the most powerful King Narnish would have some difficulty beating these bushes. The disagreeable Dr. Gobnash now? He might possibly manage it, but not immediately, and not without warning. The little man smiled. Oops. Thakkel frowned. You make it sound as though we were at the far edge of the world from them. Well, actually, it's as though we were on the far side of a sheet of silk. One who knows how might pass through the sheet. However, Dr. Gobnash's methods are direct and forceful, making pinholes in the silk and slipping through. Making these tiny holes causes such reverberation all across both sides of the silk that anyone sensitive to such things will be able to feel them. And you do not make holes in the silk? Shepakalish grinned. No, in my case I merely ooze through the weave like a drop of water. My comings and goings may still be noticed, but they are not so blatant. All these, of course, are analogies and do not completely describe the facts of the situation. They only give a means of a very general explanation. Thakkel had already started another topic. You sounded as though you've set yourself up in opposition to Dr. Gobnash. Shepakalish shook his head. It's more as though I've been set into opposition to him. I've been asked by one I'd not turned down lightly to do a few things to hinder him. I believe the intention is to eventually destroy him, though I doubt that my own part will extend so far. Interesting, for true and sure. You speak as though you're some special servant of the gods? Shepakalish shrugged. There are gods enough, and various beings of power, and not all of them agree with all the others. There are several, though, to whom the works of Dr. Gobnash are worse than detestable. You see, some of the things he has done, and call them evil. Yet these things are only a part of the things he does, and it is his less publicized deeds that have made him powerful enemies. And now, however interesting this conversation has become, I think it's time for us to rest. There's a good deal of more traveling to be done tomorrow. Delthorio had gone over to the king, that was certain. Lucy read a report to Elcoriat in private, a report that her spies in Narnish's train had sent out at great risk. The Lord Delthorio has appeared in the king's camp, asking for forgiveness for his recent transgression. As a gift to purchase his clemency, he has brought along a prisoner, the ox driver who wields the Talisman of the Winds. She looked up at Elcoriat. I've checked the decoding twice. There is no mistake. Delthorio has gone over, taking Thakkel with him as a prisoner. Elcoriat was not a man to be panicked. You think Narnish might be able to force Thakkel to use the talisman in his service? Not immediately, at any rate. I would prefer to say never, but who knows what any man might do if the torture is too strong. Not to speak the words of Dr. Gobnash, of whom we've heard numerous stories. But leaving the Talisman aside, Delthorio's defection robs us of a significant port of our forces, and I have no idea how to deal with that. He shrugged. A problem for certain. One possibility might be an immediate attack on Narnish, but just before the end of the campaigning season, depending on the surprise to give us some advantage. Would that advantage be enough, though? Be enough? Nothing is ever certain in war and battle, lady. It is probably the best alternative. If we wait until next year, Narnish will only be stronger, and we'll most likely be that much weaker. And the only other alternative is for me to negotiate a surrender with Narnish, seeking the best conditions we can obtain. You do have that alternative, lady, but when one considers Narnish's intent to turn Ascos into a howling wilderness, one must think carefully of what surrender might purchase. He might indeed agree to various conditions for the surrender, but when your army is dispersed, whether or not he keeps those conditions depends entirely on the mercy of Narnish, and we all know bloody Narnish's mercy. And if I fight another battle, the greatest likelihood that I will achieve nothing but the slaughter of more men on top of whatever revenge Narnish wishes to exact when the army is defeated. He bowed. As I said, nothing is ever certain in war and battle. Whatever your decision, I will support you. So then, call a meeting for tomorrow, at which time I will announce my decision. She was left with her thoughts. Well, surrender would mean her own death. Narnish wouldn't leave her alive for further resistance to coalesce around. Indeed, all her most powerful nobles would forfeit their lives. She wondered if she might have the strength of will to take her own life, depriving Narnish of that one victory. What if Valkoriats thought of a surprise attack? What Valkoriat had said was true. When she was gone, Narnish would revenge herself upon her land. Was there a possibility of preventing that risk by another battle? Oops. Was there a possibility of preventing that by risking another battle? She continued to sit, going over and over the facts and likelihoods. The phalanx moved toward them across the sunlit grass. Pikes presented a bristling hedge of pointed steel. So what do you see, Delphi? The boy frowned. No one can get at them with all those spear points out there. Exactly. They needn't do anything but stand still, and no enemy can get past the pike points to hurt them. And if they advance, they can push anything back, because their pikes will prevent anyone from getting close. But what if they come up against another phalanx? Delphi thought about that. But what if they came across another phalanx? Delphi thought about that. They'd both be stopped, wouldn't they? Yes, they'd both be stopped. They can't get past each other's pikes, and any thrusting they did with the pikes would most certainly be blocked by those small shields they carry. But my dad says, no matter how good you are, someone else might be better or luckier. What happens if someone is lucky enough to get in front of the rank men? When he falls, won't he make a hole in the line? Very good, Delphi. That is the reason why the phalanx drill so much and so thoroughly. They need to be the steadiest and the surest, and they need to know what to do for themselves. Watch now. He blew a 3-note call on a silver whistle he carried. A moment later, there were shouts from the drill master on the field, and here and there a man would fall. No sooner had he fallen than the man behind him stepped into his place. The pike point hedge was unbroken once more. How do they do that? They keep practicing and practicing until they do it without thinking. No, I mean, how do they know who's supposed to fall? Oh, each man has a number according to which rank and file he's in. The drill master calls out numbers, That man pretends to die. What's a rank and a file? See how they're all in lines, right to left? Well, each of those lines is called a rank. And from the front, they're all in rows behind the other. Those rows are called files. So everybody knows which rank they belong in and which file? Exactly. But what if somebody's real sick one day and can't come out to the drill? Oh, they fix that first thing. Everyone lines up in their proper ranks and files. Then the drill master gives a command to fill blank lines forward. Everyone behind a hole steps forward. But what if... Just a moment, boy. The sickleman smiled. A man spends months in the phalanx learning to do all of these things. You can't expect him to master them all in 3 mornings. Now you were given a task to do. Have you done it? Yes, sir. But you don't have leather workers and to such up to the... But don't you have leather workers and such to fix up the men's boots? Yes. When we're all settled in camp, we do. But every man must know how to fix his boots in case the need arises in the field. Even you? Yes. Oh, I believe I could still manage it. But my job is making sure that my soldiers are ready. That they have all their food and equipment. So it's best that I have a servant or two to look out for my kit. When I was a boy your age, I did all these things. If only I so knew what my troops had to do. If only so I knew what my troops had to do, and thus knew how much could be expected of them. Now, let's go look and see. Let's go look at how well you did. Okay, give me a minute here. Stumbling over sentences. Yeah, basically every time I pause, that means I'm marking something down, for those of you just joining. So, the Talisman of the Winds is loose again. And you say this action is aimed more at yourself than me? I ask then, what do you plan to do about it? I? Well, it seems as if they, this strange and nameless they, did this as an attack on you. Then you owe me 1 Talisman of the Winds. I regret that is not possible, Highness. At least, if I understand you correctly, the Talisman of the Winds is one certain class of talismans. Among this class, only 1 of each type may be operating in any one of the quarters of the world at one time. Since Horzorio was the first to produce the talisman here, no other talisman may be made to call winds. At least I could make such a talisman, but until the talisman of Ascos was destroyed, mine would be inert scraps of leather, feathers, and such. The king frowned. I believe I understand you. However, this still leaves the question. What will you do? And that is everything for tonight. So, I'm glad you could stop in. Does anybody have any questions that I may or may not be able to answer? And if not, that's okay. I will sit and wait. And if not, that's fine. I can talk to you again tomorrow. So have a good night. And yeah, exactly. I'll be back. We'll go on to chapter 12. It's getting good. I'm kind of liking it. Obviously there's things I need to work on, but you know, yeah. Okay. Talk to you later.